And that agenda is being propagandized by people in Hollywood. Again, it's elitists in the media and in Hollywood and in government who believe they ought to rule your lives and decide what is morally okay and what is morally not. And this is how you end up with the specter of Pete Davidson on SNL on Saturday Night Live, telling people over the weekend that if you're protesting lockdown, you look like a baby. I'm noticing that Pete Davidson was sitting on the set of Saturday Night Live like a foot and a half from another human being while he was saying this.
I saw the protest. People were outside the bar shouting about freedom, taunting the cops, chanting that they should arrest the governor. But it's Staten Island, so I assumed that it was just like a typical last call.
And are you against these protests?
I mean, kind of, but I'm also just happy I'm no longer the first thing people think of when they say, what's the worst thing about Staten Island?
I take it that you found these protests frustrating.
Yeah, man, they're making us look like babies. You know, it's bad when even people in Boston are like, drink at home, you queers.
Okay, first of all, I'm still not sure why people find Pete Davidson humorous, but beyond that, Pete Davidson is sitting at his workplace a foot and a half from another person wearing no mask. Right? A foot and a half from another person wearing no mask. But he gets to lecture you about what you ought to do. And his business, I've noticed, is not being destroyed. Also, you may have noticed there's a live studio audience for SNL. You know how? Because they actually designated, I'm not kidding, they actually designated live studio audiences, employees, for purposes of essential services for SNL. Okay, so it only applies to the little people. It only applies to little people like you. You own a business. You want to spend time with your family. The rules must be applied to you. And you are a bad person if you buck the rules or if you protest. The level of arrogance that is applied to one half of the American population is just insane. It's just insane. And you'll be ripped up and down, by the way, if you note this. So Matthew McConaughey committed this grave sin. So McConaughey happens to be, he is on the left. Last I checked, he's a Democrat. I know that he's in favor of gun control. He spoke at March for Our Lives. But he happens to be sort of more culturally moderate. And so he was on a show with Russell Brand. And he said, the far left in Hollywood is arrogant toward conservatives, and the world just caved in on him. How dare he say this? Because there is one thing that the left cannot stand, and that is someone calling out their bullcrap. Here was Matthew McConaughey calling out their bullcrap and getting a bunch of crap for it.
There is a lot on that illiberal left that absolutely condescend, patronize, and are arrogant towards that other 50%. When you say, hey, we want to get out the vote, we want people to be able to go vote. We're going to do a campaign to let people vote. I'm like, 100%. Yes, everyone. Is there anyone who would say no to that? And then they can't help themselves. At the very end of it, they go, so we don't let those criminal get back in office. You're going, whoa. You're like, no, don't say the last part. You lost 50% of your audience.
Okay, McConaughey got a bunch of crap from people in Hollywood for this. How dare he? Because how dare he point out that there's an entire other side to the political aisle? This is the kind of scorn that Hollywood has for you. This is the kind of scorn the media have for you and your politicians. Right? This group of elitists who all traffic in the same circles, these people believe they ought to rule you from above. And if you buck that system in any way, regardless of the industry that you are in, then you will be called out and you'll be ostracized. You'll be socially ostracized. I'm going to get to more of that in just one second because, it does feel in the United States, and it has felt for quite a while. I'm firmly convinced that this is what the Trump backlash has been about. I'm firmly convinced that it feels, if you are on one side of the political aisle, which is to say anywhere to the right of Karl Marx at this point, but certainly anywhere to the right of Hillary Clinton, that you are under constant assault. You're under constant assault from authoritarian government officials, from a media that will lie to you and about you. You're under assault from Hollywood that wishes to promulgate messages that run directly counter to your values. You're under assault from social media that censors your viewpoints, and from journalists who will go digging through all of your old posts to find something that they can use as a club to cudgel you. You're under assault from corporations and from your bosses who might fire you if a bad old tweet is resurfaced. It feels like that. It feels like the walls are closing in. And that is not a coincidence. There is a plan from elitists to make the walls close in on you because they must achieve your silence. They must achieve not just your silence, but your assent. They want you to be complicit in the destruction of your own values. That is the goal here. And that is why it feels monolithic. That's why it feels like a tsunami right now, a cultural tsunami. And Trump was a middle finger to that. That middle finger is not going to go away post-election, regardless of what happens, regardless of how this election ends up being adjudicated, regardless of what the Electoral College does. Okay, that push to take over all of the institutions of power in our society, from government to Hollywood to academia to the education system to all of the main outlets of media to social media, That push is going to continue unabated from the left because they're engaged in renormalization of American values. They're engaged in institutional capture so they can cram down on you a particular agenda and then ostracize you if you dare to speak up against it. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our future content.